The faint, sharp smell of antiseptic was the first thing to hit me. I opened my eyes to the sterile white of a hospital ceiling. The sounds came next. The low murmur of voices, the hurried squeak of a nurse's shoes on linoleum. Now it felt real. I flexed my fingers, expecting the cold, hard edges of an urn, but felt only the soft give of a cotton blanket. I was back. The last thing I remembered was Olivia's funeral. A brutal car crash had extinguished the only light in my life. In the 10 years that followed, I'd clawed my way up from being the Vance family's resident joke, the worthless husband living off their fortune, to the apex of the corporate world. I got her revenge, and I destroyed myself in the process. When it was done, I ended the life of that hollowed-out shell of a man in front of her grave, a body ravaged by whiskey and hate. I never expected to open my eyes again, 10 years in the past. I shot upright, ripping the 4 from the back of my hand and stumbling out of the room. The digital display on the wall was crisp and clear, May 10th, 2024. Exactly 1 month before the crash. There was still time. It wasn't too late. A raw, ecstatic joy seized my heart, so powerful I could hear it pounding against my ribs like a war drum. I bolted down the stairs and threw myself in front of the first Uber I saw, my voice trembling as I gave the address. The Summit Estates, and step on it. The city streets blurred past the window, familiar and yet alien. This was the city from a decade ago, before the new financial district had devoured the skyline, the cars on the road looking like vintage models. I didn't care. My mind was filled with only one person. Olivia. My Olivia. This time, I wouldn't let a single thing hurt you. I'll use the memory of the next 10 years to pave your way, to clear every obstacle. I'll make you the happiest woman in the world. The car screeched to a halt at the gates. I practically fell out, using my fingerprint to open the front door of our house and bursting inside. The living room was empty. Olivia, I'm home, I yelled, my voice cracking with an irrepressible glee. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, sounded from the second floor. I looked up and saw the face that was etched into the very fabric of my soul. She wore a silk robe, her long hair draped over her shoulders. Her face was a mask of cold indifference, as beautiful and remote as a marble statue in the moonlight. She was still so stunning it made my heart ache. Olivia. I opened my arms, ready to rush forward and hold her, just like the countless times I'd woken up from nightmares of a world without her. But what she did next froze me in place. She descended the stairs holding a document. She walked right up to me and held it out. Divorce papers. Sign it, she said, her voice colder than her expression, utterly devoid of warmth. The house, the cars, they're all yours. I'll even throw in $10 million. The only condition is that you get the hell out of my house and stop wasting my time. I just stood there, my mind a complete blank. Divorce? In my past life, we'd argued, sure. She was frustrated with my lack of ambition. But she had never, not once, mentioned divorce. She was disappointed in me, but she never wanted to give up on me. The look in her eyes back then had been a mix of helpless frustration and pity, never this. This pure, undisguised disgust. She was looking at me like I was something you'd scrape off the bottom of your shoe. Olivia, what? What are you talking about? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She frowned, a flicker of impatience crossing her features, and it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Because I remembered with perfect clarity that when my Olivia frowned, she had a habit of biting her lower lip. This woman didn't. Ethan, are you deaf? She took a step back, as if the very air I occupied was toxic to her. There's nothing left between us. Don't you feel ashamed, clinging to me like a leech? A leech. The blood in my veins turned to ice. My Olivia. She would never use a word that cruel. She would just sigh and say, Ethan, can't you just try a little harder? I stared into her eyes, desperately searching that frozen lake for any trace of the woman I knew. There was nothing. Only a stranger's wariness and an impatient urge to be rid of me. This wasn't my Olivia. A thought, so wild it felt insane, surfaced from the depths of my shock. This woman had my wife's face, my wife's body, but it was like her soul had been replaced. In that instant, every ounce of blood in my body froze solid. My stunned silence was, to her, clearly just the preamble to a pathetic, drawn-out scene. I could see the annoyance practically boiling over in her eyes. She was probably bracing herself for the usual theatrics from the spineless man she thought she knew, expecting tears and begging. She had no idea a tsunami was tearing through my mind. The euphoria of my rebirth had been doused with a bucket of Arctic water, a chill so deep it settled in my bones. I didn't take the divorce papers. Instead, I turned and walked into the kitchen. The move seemed to surprise her. She watched me with suspicion, as if expecting me to grab a knife and threaten to kill myself. What are you trying to pull now? She crossed her arms, standing in the doorway, keeping a safe distance. I ignored her and opened the fridge. It was stocked with the usual high-end groceries, Wagyu beef, organic vegetables, imported lobster. But tucked away in the corner was a small, unassuming bottle of red-hot sauce. It was a brand I'd brought back for her from a trip to my hometown. My Olivia, the elegant Ice Queen CEO, was, in private, a fiend for spicy food. She always said work was so draining that only the burn of a good hot sauce could wake her up. I pulled out a few ingredients, tied on an apron, and started cooking. I was making her 3 favorites: spicy black and red fish, Nashville hot chicken, and a simple smashed cucumber salad. If she was still her, she wouldn't be able to resist. The only sounds in the kitchen were the rhythmic chop of my knife and the sizzle of oil in the pan. I could feel her gaze on my back, shifting from suspicion to confusion, and finally to a kind of baffled scrutiny. She was probably wondering how the lazy, useless man of her memories could possibly know his way around a kitchen with such practiced ease. Half an hour later, 3 dishes sat on the table, glistening under a layer of red chili oil, the spicy aroma filling the air. I untied the apron and gestured to the table. "Dinner's ready," I said calmly. "You said you were hungry, didn't you?" It was her old code. Whenever I said that, no matter how angry she was, she would sit down and eat. The woman in the doorway just glanced at the feast, her frown deepening. "I don't eat spicy food," she said, her tone sharp and final, as if I'd personally insulted her. "Ethan, are you doing this just to piss me off?" Her words sent my heart plummeting into a bottomless abyss. The last flicker of hope died. I looked at her and managed a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Right, I forgot." She snorted, clearly thinking my little act was pathetic. I didn't press her. I just sat down myself, picked up my fork, and began to eat in silence. The fish was tender, the chili fragrant, but in my mouth, it all tasted bitter as poison. "Let me ask you one more question," I said, spearing a piece of chicken without looking up. "That little clay sculpture I gave you, the one in the study, where did you put it?" I'd made it for her right after we got married. I spent a week on it, clumsily molding 2 little figures out of a block of cheap clay. One of me, one of her. They were hideous, but she'd treasured it, keeping it in the most prominent spot on her desk. She said it was the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received. The woman behind me fell silent. I could feel her eyes on my back, sizing me up like a psychiatrist evaluating a patient. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice laced with mockery. "A clay sculpture? Ethan, have you gone broke and started hallucinating? When have I ever had something so childish in my study?" My knuckles turned white around my fork. That was it. That was all the proof I needed. Every attempt to connect, every piece of US that I threw at her, she shattered with cold, vacant ignorance. I slowly put down my fork, stood up, and turned to face her. For the first time, I looked at her with calm, deliberate appraisal. The same face, the same body, even the same subtle wave in her hair. But the soul was gone. My Olivia, the woman who would get exasperated but still laugh at my clumsiness, who would pull the blanket over me in the middle of the night, who complained about me but secretly cherished the ugly little sculpture I made, was gone. A stranger was living inside the body I loved more than life itself. Who was she? And where did my Olivia go? A tidal wave of grief and rage rose in my throat, choking me. I looked at her, at the face I had loved for 2 lifetimes, and my voice came out as a rasp I didn't recognize as my own. "Okay," I said. "I get it now." Then, as she watched in stunned disbelief, I took the divorce papers from the counter. I didn't sign them. I just tore them, slowly and deliberately, into tiny pieces. "We're not getting divorced." I dropped the confetti of paper into the trash can and met her shocked gaze. "From now on," I said, each word a stone, "we're going to make this work." My actions were clearly far outside her expectations. Her beautiful eyes screamed, "Are you insane?" In her mind, a kept man who was being offered a $10 million buyout should have been gratefully packing his bags. How dare he tear up the agreement? How dare he say, "Make this work"? She probably had a whole script running in her head where I was playing hard to get, angling for a bigger payday. "Ethan, don't push your luck," she said, her voice dropping to a low threat. "You think tearing that up changes anything? I have 100 ways to make sure you walk away with nothing." I didn't argue. I just met her gaze. I said, "We're not getting divorced. If you want to take it to court, I'll see you there." Without another look at her, I went upstairs to our bedroom. In my past life, my insecurities and her aloofness had led us to sleep in separate rooms soon after the wedding. But right now, I just needed a space to think. I shut the door and slid down against it, my back pressed to the wood. My strength seemed to drain away all at once. The grief was a rising tide, threatening to drown me. I buried my face in my knees, my shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs that were more suffocating than any scream. I don't know how long I sat there. By the time I looked up, the sky outside was completely dark. I wiped the tear tracks from my face, my eyes hardening with a new resolve. Crying was the most useless thing in the world. The priority wasn't to wallow in grief, but to figure out 3 things. 1, who was this woman occupying my wife's body? 2, where had my Olivia's soul gone? Was there any chance of getting her back? 3, how could I protect this body and the Vance family from repeating the tragic fate of my past life? That last point was the most urgent. I forced myself to calm down, to think like I did in my past life when I was managing billion-dollar hedge funds. The tragedy had 2 root causes. Internally, my own incompetence meant I couldn't support Olivia or gain any respect within her family. Externally, there were the vicious attacks from business rivals, culminating in a carefully orchestrated car crash. The turning point for all of it was just 1 month away. The day Olivia's father, Robert Vance, the chairman of Vance Corporation, would have a massive heart attack. After that, the company was left rudderless, plagued by internal strife and outside threats, and began its slow, inevitable slide into ruin. My job was to stop it all, and to do that, I needed power and capital. Money. I needed a lot of money. I stood up, walked to the desk, and opened my old laptop. The password was still Olivia's birthday. The new her would never have guessed. The computer was painfully slow, but it worked. I opened a browser, looked at the financial news from 10 years ago, and a cold smile touched my lips. For everyone else in this world, the future was a fog. But for me, the next 10 years were a crystal clear roadmap. Every market crash, every bubble, every dark horse stock that was about to go supernova, it was all etched in my brain. This was my superpower. I quickly identified my first target, a stock called Helios Innovations. I remembered with perfect clarity that in 1 week, this obscure little company would announce a revolutionary new battery technology. Its stock would skyrocket, multiplying tenfold in just 3 days. That would be my seed money. I emptied my pockets and checked my bank apps. My total net worth was less than $5,000. A drop in the ocean. I needed startup capital. I picked up my phone and dialed a familiar number. My dad. "Hey, Ethan. What's up? Is everything okay over there?" His voice was hesitant, worried. In my past life, I felt indebted to my parents until the day I died. They had drained their savings to help with my wedding, only to endure the gossip of our relatives. "Dad, I need money," I said, getting straight to the point. Silence on the other end. "How much?" "As much as you can get." "Dad, I need you to take out a second mortgage on a house." "What?" His voice shot up. "Are you out of your mind? That house was your grandfather's." "Dad, trust me. Just this once." My voice was quiet, but held an unwavering force. 1 week. Just give me 1 week. I'll pay you back with interest, and I'll buy you and Mom a new condo downtown. My tone must have stunned him. He'd never heard me speak like that before. "Ethan, what's gotten into you? Did something happen with you and Olivia?" "We're fine." "Dad, this is the only time in my life I will ever ask you for something like this." There was a long silence on the line. I could picture him on the other end, torn and conflicted. Finally, he let out a long sigh. "All right, I trust you." When I hung up, my eyes were burning. The next morning, I had the $200,000 from my father's mortgage. Without a moment's hesitation, I opened a new brokerage account and put every last cent into Helios Innovations. After that was done, I drove back to the house. Olivia had already left for work. She probably thought I was just bluffing, that I'd hang around for a few days before crawling away. I didn't try to contact her. Instead, I started playing the part of the perfect husband. I cleaned the house, did the laundry, then went to the market to buy groceries for dinner. I wasn't doing any of it to please that stranger. I was taking care of the home that belonged to me and Olivia. Every corner of this house held a memory of us. For the next few days, I repeated the same routine. I researched the market during the day and took care of the house at night. And Olivia watched me every day with the detached curiosity of someone watching a play. She never spoke to me, and she refused to eat a single bite of the food I made. She ordered takeout every night, leaving the empty containers by the door like a silent protest. She was probably waiting for the show. The moment my investment imploded, my father disowned me, and I came crying back to her, begging for a handout. She had no idea I wasn't acting. I was setting the stage for a performance that was about to shatter her entire reality. A week can feel like an eternity. For the woman occupying my wife's body, I'd started thinking of her in my head as just her. Those 7 days were a silent standoff, a cat and mouse game. Every morning she'd stride past me in an immaculate power suit and designer heels, her eyes filled with undisguised contempt. I knew she was counting down the days until my $200,000 vanished in a thin air, eagerly anticipating the look on my face when I hit rock bottom. She even started taking calls from her friends where I could overhear her. "Yeah, he's still here, won't leave. He's lost his mind, took his parents' retirement money to gamble on the stock market. He's about to lose everything. And then, I guess I'll be charitable and buy him a one-way bus ticket back home." Coach, of course. A peal of shrill laughter came through the phone. I stood in the kitchen, calmly stirring a pot of soup, feeling nothing. The me from my past life would have been consumed by shame and anger. But the me of today just found it pathetic. A frog in a well has no concept of the dragon about to take flight. On the 7th day, a Monday, the market opened. I didn't sit glued to my computer. I went to the butcher shop and bought fresh pork ribs and a winter melon, just like any other day. The outcome was already written in stone. At 4 p.m., the market closed. I leisurely opened my laptop and logged into my brokerage account. The string of zeros was almost dizzying. My initial $200,000 had a beautiful times 10 attached to it. $2 million. My life, my real life, was officially beginning right now. I closed the laptop and went back to my soup as if that number was just a meaningless score in a video game. At 7 p.m., the front door opened, right on schedule. She was home. She seemed to be in a good mood today, a faint smile playing on her lips. She had probably spent the day rehearsing her most cutting remarks, ready to enjoy the spectacle of my breakdown. She took off her shoes without a glance in my direction, sank gracefully onto the living room sofa, and turned on the TV, switching it to the financial news network. It was a habit of hers. Soon, the anchor was breathlessly reporting on the day's market miracle. Helios Innovations, this year's biggest dark horse, announced its revolutionary graphene battery technology today. Spurred by the news, the stock price shot to the moon, hitting its daily limit at the opening bell. After 3 consecutive days of gains, its value has increased tenfold, creating another legend in the stock market. I noticed that the hand holding her glass of water trembled slightly when she heard the name Helios Innovations. I walked over with a bowl of the winter melon and pork rib soup and placed it gently on the coffee table in front of her. "Soup's ready. Have some while it's hot," I said evenly. She didn't look at me or the soup. Her eyes were glued to the glowing red line of the stock chart on the screen, as if she could burn a hole through it with her stare. The air in the room felt thick static. After a long moment, she slowly, deliberately turned her head to look at me. Her expression was no longer just disdain. It was shock, confusion, disbelief, and a flicker of fear she herself probably didn't recognize. How did you know?" Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't had a drink in days. I just smiled and offered her a spoon. "Try it. I got the seasoning just right today." She didn't take it. She shot to her feet, rushed to the entryway closet where my jacket was hanging, and started frantically digging through the pockets. She found my phone, unlocked it, and opened the brokerage app. When that glaring number, $2,034,562, was clearly reflected in her pupils, I saw her body sway. In that moment, her entire worldview crumbled. She looked up, staring at me as if I were some kind of monster. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Of course, she couldn't understand. In a script she thought she knew, I was supposed to be a complete and utter loser, a freeloader who couldn't survive without the Vance family's money. How could this loser possibly have made $2 million in a single week? It didn't follow the plot. Her face was ashen. She stumbled backward, the phone slipping from her limp hand and landing silently on the plush rug. The screen stayed lit, like a single mocking eye. "Who are you?" she finally managed to ask. I picked up the phone, turned off the screen, and slipped it back into my pocket. "I'm your husband, Ethan Miller." I paid no more attention to her state of shock. I simply walked to the dining table, sat down, and served myself a bowl of rice. I knew, as of tonight, the rules of the game between us had fundamentally changed. I finished my dinner, washed the dishes, and then, instead of going to my room, I put on my shoes to leave. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice betraying a new note of anxiety she couldn't hide. "Just for a drive," I said, not looking back. I took the old car she was planning to generously give me and drove out of the gated community. But I wasn't headed for any bar or club. I drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. It was dark and silent, the only sound the rustle of wind through the pine trees. Following my memory, I found a remote, neglected corner. There was a small, simple grave marker there, not even a proper headstone. It was my mother-in-law, Olivia's mom. She had died when Olivia was very young, a loss that had left a permanent void in her life. In my past life, after I made my fortune, the first thing I did was move her remains to the most beautiful mausoleum in the city. But for now, this place was desolate. I placed a bouquet of white daisies I'd bought on the way on top of the marker. "Mom, I'm back to see you," I said, my voice thick as I knelt and wiped the dust from the stone. "And I'm back to see Olivia. Don't worry. This time, I won't let anything happen to her." I spoke for a long time, pouring out the words I had held inside for 10 years. I didn't notice the black Porsche parked behind a large tree near the cemetery entrance. Inside, the woman calling herself Olivia Vance gripped the steering wheel, her face a mask of utter confusion as she watched me from afar. She had followed me, probably expecting to catch me blowing my new fortune on some vice, to get some leverage over me. She never could have dreamed I would come here, to a place that even she, the daughter, had no idea existed. After that night, the atmosphere in the house grew strange. She no longer made snide remarks or pointedly ignored me. Most of the time, she just watched me with an inquisitive, calculating, almost fearful gaze. She was like a startled cat, fur on end, cautiously trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly been turned upside down. As for me, I began to completely ignore her existence. I used the $2 million as seed money to launch an investment firm, renting a small office in the financial district. I started leveraging the memories in my head to wreak havoc on the market, shorting companies on the verge of collapse, buying up undervalued stocks, investing in tech startups I knew were destined for greatness. My wealth began to snowball at a terrifying rate. Within 2 weeks, my personal assets had crossed the 9-figure mark. I stopped staying at the house, instead taking a long-term lease on a suite in a residential hotel near my office. I needed my own space to plan my campaign of protection and revenge. Of course, I still went back to the house every day, not to see her, but to water my orchid. It was a plant my Olivia had loved, and I'd kept it thriving. Whenever I went back, she was always there. No matter how late, the living room light was on. She had stopped ordering takeout. There were signs of cooking in the kitchen. The food was terrible, but she was trying. Sometimes, as I was about to leave, she would stop me with a tentative question. How is the company doing?" "Fine. Do you need any help? I have some connections." "No." Our conversations never lasted more than a few sentences. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to figure me out. The story of a loser husband's meteoric rise was stranger than any fantasy novel. She was desperate for an answer that would either validate or destroy the script she thought she was living in. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I would let her stew in her confusion and doubt until every last bit of her arrogance had burned away. And in the middle of this strange, quiet Cold War, the first crisis arrived. One day, I got a call from the Vance family's housekeeper, informing me that Mr. Vance had invited me to dinner that weekend. This was unexpected. My father-in-law, Robert Vance, was a stubborn, traditional man. While he'd approved my marriage to Olivia, he'd never respected me, this son-in-law with no background or ambition. He never invited me over for anything other than major holidays. I had a feeling something was about to happen. On Saturday, I arrived at the Vance family mansion right on time. The atmosphere felt off the moment I walked in. In the living room, sitting with my father-in-law and her, was a young man I didn't recognize. He was dressed in a bespoke suit, a limited edition Patek Philippe on his wrist. He had a polished, friendly smile, but his eyes held the unmistakable glint of a predator. Kevin Lynch. My pupils contracted. I'd know this man if he were burned to ash. In my past life, he was the one. He set the traps, bled Vance Corp dry, and then orchestrated the crash that killed my Olivia. The man I had sworn to destroy. And here he was a decade early. My hands, hanging at my sides, clenched in a fist so tight my nails dug into my palms. Ethan, you're here. Have a seat, Robert said, his smile a little strained. He gestured to Kevin. Let me introduce you. This is Kevin Lynch, CEO of Innovatech. Kevin, this is my son-in-law, Ethan. Mr. Miller, a pleasure. Kevin stood and offered his hand, his smile sly as a fox. I looked at his outstretched hand and made no move to take it. I just met his eyes and spoke calmly. Have we met before, Mr. Lynch? The air froze. Robert's expression soured. The smile on Kevin's face twitched, though he recovered quickly, smoothly retracting his hand. You got a sense of humor, Mr. Miller. If we didn't know each other before, we do now. She sat beside him, watching me with a deep frown, her eyes filled with disapproval. In her view, my behavior was rude and childish, needlessly offending an important guest. Of course she thought that. She had no idea the man sitting next to her was a venomous snake. In my past life, she had been completely fooled by his charming facade, walking right into his trap. Olivia, what are you doing? Pour Ethan some tea, Robert said, trying to smooth things over. She got up reluctantly to do as he asked. At the dinner table, Kevin and Robert got along splendidly. He pontificated about market trends and hinted at the vast potential for a partnership between Innovatech and Vance Corp. Robert was clearly hooked. Vance Corp had been stagnating, its profits declining, and he was desperate for a new path to growth. She listened intently, even chiming in with insightful comments that earned admiring glances from Kevin. Watching them, I felt my stomach turn. I kept my head down, eating in silence, an outsider at my own family's table. No one noticed the cold, dangerous curve of my lips. Kevin Lynch, since you've served yourself up on a platter, I'll be happy to show you what hell on earth looks like. After dinner, Kevin casually made his way over to her. Ms. Vance, I've heard so much about your business acumen, and you've more than lived up to the reputation. I wonder if I might have the pleasure of buying you a coffee sometime soon to continue our discussion. A blatant attempt to poach and charm her. She hesitated. Logically, she knew he was a potential partner she shouldn't alienate. But for some reason, her eyes flickered toward me. I was still on the sofa, sipping my tea, acting as if I hadn't heard a thing. Well, she began. I put down my cup, stood up, and walked right between them. I casually wrapped an arm around her shoulder, pulling her against my side. Her body went rigid, but I held her with a force that defied resistance. I looked up and met Kevin's startled eyes, and I smiled. Sorry, Mr. Lynch, I said, resting my chin on the top of her head, an act of intimacy worthy of a newlywed couple. My wife is a little busy tonight. She has to get home and make me some soup. The color drained from Kevin's face. I kept smiling, but I lowered my voice so only he could hear. By the way, Mr. Lynch, I heard you've been moving some company assets through a few offshore shell corporations. You want to be careful with that. The IRS has a sharper nose than a bloodhound. Every last drop of blood vanished from his face. Kevin Lynch practically fled the mansion. The way he looked at me wasn't as a freeloader anymore, but as a demon crawled up from the depths of hell. In the living room, Robert Vance looked utterly bewildered, while the woman in my arms had gone from stiff to limp. She tilted her head back to look up at me, her beautiful eyes filled with a swirling storm of shock and confusion. I released her, as if the possessive embrace had just been a figment of her imagination. "Dad, I have some work to finish at the office. I'm heading out," I said, nodding to Robert. I turned and walked away without giving her a second glance. I could feel her searing gaze on my back all the way to the front door. Driving back, my mood was anything but triumphant. Kevin's early appearance had disrupted my plans, but what chilled me more was her reaction. That moment of hesitation before I intervened told me everything. In her eyes, I was still an outsider, while Kevin was a potential ally who could help her escape the plot of her novel. She was trying to make a deal with the devil, and she didn't even know it. "My Olivia, where are you?" If you were here, you would have seen through his mask in a second. A sharp pain lanced through my chest. Just then, my personal cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. A calm, professional voice spoke on the other end. "Mr. Miller? This is Dr. Matthews, Chief of Cardiac Surgery at Mount Sinai." My heart leaped into my throat. Dr. Matthews, the top cardiac specialist in the country. In my past life, I had paid a fortune to hire him, but it had been too late. "This is he." "Yes, hello. As per your instructions, my team has established our visiting fellowship at Mercy General. The patient you mentioned, Mr. Robert Vance, was just admitted to the ER. He suffered an acute myocardial infarction. It was happening. The exact same time, the exact same diagnosis as before. My palms were instantly slick with sweat, but my voice was steady. "Understand. Dr. Matthews, I'm counting on you. Rest assured, Mr. Miller, we've activated our highest level emergency protocol." I hung up, slammed the car into a U-turn, and sped toward Mercy General. In my past life, my father-in-law had been brought to this very hospital. The attending physician was inexperienced and missed the critical window for treatment. He survived, but was left partially paralyzed, a blow from which Vance Corp never recovered. I would not let that happen again. 2 weeks earlier, I had used my newfound wealth and influence to make a substantial research grant to Mount Sinai, on condition that Dr. Matthews and his entire team establish a temporary academic exchange at Mercy General. I told them to be ready, at a moment's notice, to save the life of a man named Robert Vance. They thought I was insane. Now, they knew I was a prophet. When I arrived, the light above the operating room was on. She was there, along with a few other relatives, all of them distraught and crying. She was the calmest of the group, but her pale face and trembling fingers betrayed her fear. The moment she saw me, she ran over as if I were a lifeline. "Ethan, my dad, he just..." Her voice was choked with tears. "It's okay. I'm here." I took her cold hand, giving her a reassuring look. "I've arranged for the best surgeons in the country to operate on him. Your dad is going to be fine." My composure was a stark contrast to the surrounding panic. She just stared at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "You arranged it?" "Yes." I didn't elaborate, just led her to a bench in the hallway. "I've been worried about his health for a while. I know his medical history better than you do." It wasn't a lie. After he was paralyzed, I was his primary caregiver. I knew every medication, every allergy, every detail of his condition by heart. She fell silent, letting me hold her hand, leaning against me quietly. Hours crawled by, each second an agony of waiting. Finally, the light above the ER went out. Dr. Matthews emerged, pulling off his mask. He looked tired but relieved. "The surgery was a complete success," he announced. He was brought in just in time. "The patient is stable and out of danger. Another 10 minutes, and it would have been a very different outcome." A wave of relieved sobs and cheers went through the family. The knot in my own chest finally loosened. Her body went limp, and she nearly collapsed before I caught her. Thank you," she whispered, looking up at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Robert was wheeled out, still unconscious but stable. As the family swarmed around him, he woke up, and after learning that it was I who had summoned a team of world-class surgeons to save his life, he was silent for a very long time. He asked to speak to me alone in his room. "Ethan," he said, his gaze deeply conflicted. "All these years, I was wrong about you." I shook my head. "We're family, Dad. From that day on, my standing in the Vance family was transformed. Robert, a man set in his ways, began to treat me as his right hand. He wouldn't make a single major business decision without calling me first. And the way she looked at me changed completely. The fear and confusion were replaced by something new, dependence and awe. She couldn't understand how I had known, how I had orchestrated everything. I was an enigma, a puzzle she couldn't solve. And for a woman, that kind of mystery can be an irresistible attraction. She started seeking me out, texting me, even trying to cook for me, bringing her clumsy attempts at soup to my office. The script in her head had been torn to shreds by reality. She started trying, tentatively, to be a wife. But I, just as deliberately, began to push her away. Life continued in this strange push and pull. My firm, Pangea Capital, became a legend in the industry. After a few more flawlessly executed market plays, I was the most feared and mysterious name on Wall Street. My net worth was no longer measured in mere millions. I bought the entire penthouse floor of a skyscraper downtown and converted it into my personal fortress, complete with a state-of-the-art trading floor and a terrace that overlooked the entire city. I thought distance from that house would ease the ache in my heart. I was wrong. Late at night, after a day of corporate warfare, I'd stand alone on that terrace, looking at the city lights, and the gnawing loneliness would feel more acute than ever. I'd think back to my past life, to the nights Olivia and I would squeeze onto the tiny balcony of her old apartment. She'd lean against me, counting stars, talking nonsense. "Ethan, if we had all the money in the world, what's the first thing you'd do? Buy a huge house, and then buy you all the clothes and bags you could ever want." She'd snort, so tacky, but she'd snuggle deeper into my arms. I'd open an orphanage and an animal shelter. Now, I had more money than I could ever spend, but the person who counted stars with me was gone. She started visiting my office more often. At first, it was under the pretext of bringing me food. Later, she stopped bothering with excuses and would just show up with coffee and pastries for my team. My employees started looking at us with knowing glances, calling her the boss's wife behind her back. She seemed to enjoy it, a small smile touching her lips whenever she heard it. She started inserting herself into my life. My minimalist apartment was suddenly filled with feminine touches, pink slippers, cute throw pillows. She bought me clothes, styles I used to like. She was trying so hard to be a good wife. She was imitating the Olivia from my memories. I knew she must have found old photos or social media posts, and was clumsily piecing together a persona of what Ethan's wife should be. It made me feel sick with a profound sadness. A fake, no matter how perfect the imitation, could never be the real thing. One night, I was working late on an overseas acquisition. It was after midnight when I got back to my apartment. The living room lights were on. She was curled up on the sofa, fast asleep, wearing one of my white button-down shirts. There were tear stains on her long eyelashes. On the coffee table, a full dinner sat cold and untouched. The sight, for some reason, pricked at my heart. I walked over to wake her, but my eyes were drawn to a book tucked under her arm. A thick, leather-bound journal. I recognized the cover. It was the first birthday present I ever gave Olivia. My breath caught in my throat. Gently, I slid the journal out from under her. I opened it to the first page and saw Olivia's familiar, elegant handwriting. August 15th, 2022. Sunny. Married Ethan today. Dad says he's a good, dependable man who will treat me well. But when I look at him, so timid and unsure of himself, I just feel annoyed. I guess this is my life now. December 3rd, 2022. Overcast. Had a huge fight with him today. I offered him a job at my company, and he refused. Said he didn't want people to talk. As if a grown man doing nothing at home doesn't give them enough to talk about. I'm so disappointed in him. I turned page after page, reliving our painful, repressed history. The entries were filled with her disappointment, her confusion about our marriage, until I got to the very last page. It was dated the day before our crash. June 9th, 2024. Zen. He's been different these last few days. He's not quiet anymore. He jokes with me, takes me to food trucks, holds my hand, and runs with me in the rain like a little kid. He said he was just insecure before, afraid he couldn't give me the life I deserved. He said he's going to try now. Looking into his eyes, so bright with hope, I suddenly realized that maybe I've been wrong all along. Maybe I never really knew him at all. Ethan, you idiot. I think I'm falling in love with you. The last line was blurred, smudged by a teardrop. My own tears, hot and unstoppable, fell onto the page, mingling with hers from a decade ago. She loved me, too. All that time, while I was hurting for her, she was hurting for me. It wasn't one-sided. We just missed each other. I clutched the journal to my chest, my body shaking with sobs. The sound woke her. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and her sleepy confusion turned to alarm when she saw me. Ethan? What? What's wrong? She started to move toward me. I snapped my head up, my eyes red and wild. Who told you could touch my things? I roared, my voice raw with grief and fury. Who said you could touch her journal? She flinched back, terrified, her face pale. I just wanted to understand you better. Understand me? I laughed, a harsh, broken sound, and stalked toward her. What gives you the right? Who the hell are you? You're just a thief who stole her body. A miserable, pathetic thief. Give her back to me. Give me back my Olivia. I grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her, my control completely gone. She started crying, tears streaming down her face. I don't know. I really don't know. She sobbed. I just woke up here. I didn't ask for this. Her desperate cries finally pierced through my rage. I let her go, and she crumpled to the floor, her thin shoulders shaking in the dim light. And in her tear-filled eyes, I saw two emotions I hadn't seen before, jealousy and fear. She had fallen in love with me, this soul from another world, and she knew, with devastating certainty, that the man she loved was in love with the original soul that had inhabited her body. That knowledge was sharper than any knife. After that night, the fragile truce between us was shattered. She moved out of my apartment and back into the Vance mansion. We were strangers again, but this time, the roles were reversed. She was the one in torment. I, in turn, threw myself completely into my plans. Kevin Lynch was my first target. I marshaled all my resources, weaving a net so vast and intricate he would never escape. I dug up every dirty secret from his past. Tax evasion, contract fraud, embezzlement, even a few suspicious deaths he'd been connected to. The evidence piled up, but I waited. I needed the perfect moment to utterly destroy him. It came soon enough. Vance Corp was stabilizing, but Kevin wasn't done. Just like in my past life, he bribed a senior executive at Vance to forge a massive overseas procurement contract, a scheme designed to drain all of the company's liquid assets and send it into a death spiral. When the news broke, Vance Corp's stock plummeted. The board was in chaos. As acting CEO, she was thrown into the fire. She made frantic calls, begged for help, but every door was slammed in her face. She didn't sleep for 2 days, growing visibly haggard. On the third night, she came to my apartment. It was the first time I'd seen her since our fight. She stood at my door in a wrinkled suit, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes. The queen had been dethroned. She looked like a lost child. Ethan. Her voice broke on the first word. Can you help me? I leaned against the door frame, feeling no pity. Help you? Why would I do that? I said coldly. Vance Corp is yours. Whether it lives or dies is no concern of mine. She swayed, the last bit of color draining from her face. Please, she whispered, reaching for my arm. I stepped aside. This body belongs to Olivia. I said, my voice like ice. Vance Corp was her father's life's work. I won't let them be destroyed on my watch. But I have one condition. You step down as CEO. She froze, understanding dawning in her eyes. I was staging a takeover. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. You're a cruel man, Ethan. It takes one to know one. She agreed. The next day, at an emergency board meeting, she announced her resignation and nominated me, Ethan Miller, to take her place. With Robert Vance's full backing and my own formidable financial power, the motion passed unanimously. Just as Kevin Lynch was preparing to close his trap, I sprung mine. I handed over all my evidence on him to the FBI and the SEC. Simultaneously, I held a press conference, exposing his fraudulent contract to the world. The scandal was explosive. Innovatech's stock didn't just fall, it ceased to exist. Kevin Lynch and his entire corrupt network were annihilated. The day he was arrested, it was raining. I stood in my new office at the top of the Vance Tower, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as they put him in handcuffs and shoved him into a police car. My revenge was half complete. Olivia, I thought, did you see that? That night, the Van Cess held a celebratory dinner. Everyone was toasting me, showering me with praise. Only she sat alone in a corner, drinking glass after glass of wine in silence. After the guests left, she grabbed my arm as I was about to leave. She was drunk, her cheeks flushed, her eyes hazy, but with a desperate clarity. She pulled me into the center of the living room, to the huge wedding portrait hanging on the wall. In the photo, Olivia and I were smiling, happy. Ethan, she said, her voice thick with tears, tell me, is it this face you love, or the person who used to live inside it? The question was a poison dagger straight to my heart. I looked at her, at the face I had loved across 2 lifetimes, and into the eyes of a stranger who loved me with a painful intensity. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I spoke, my voice devoid of all emotion. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I reached out and gently touched her left wrist. It was smooth, flawless. I looked back in her eyes and dropped the bomb I had been holding on to for months. You're not her. My wife loves spicy food. She was always cold. When she smiled, she had a tiny dimple on her right cheek. And on her left wrist, I said, leaning in close, my voice a final, damning whisper, she had a small brown mole. Who are you? The air in the room seemed to vanish. Every emotion on her face, the drunkenness, the pain, the desperation, froze into a single expression of pure, unadulterated horror. She stared at me, unmoving, her pupils shrinking to pinpricks. After an eternity, she found her voice. It was a dry, rasping sound. You knew. I've always known, I said calmly, feeling like a judge delivering a final verdict. From the first day I came back, from the moment you handed me those divorce papers. Came back, she repeated the words, her expression shifting from terror to a profound, surreal confusion. You came back from where? I nodded. I never thought I'd tell anyone. But looking at that face, the words just came out. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I needed to confess. Or maybe I just wanted to see what would be left between us when all the secrets were gone. She stumbled backward and collapsed onto the sofa. The revelation was too much. She had time traveled, and I had been reborn. We were 2 actors on the same stage, reading from completely different scripts, performing a tragedy of errors. She thought she was the villain in a trashy romance novel, and I was the underdog hero. She tried so hard to escape the plot, only to find out the real story was infinitely more complex and cruel. So, she looked up, her eyes vacant. You've just been watching me make a fool of myself this whole time, haven't you? I didn't answer. She let out a hollow laugh. My name is Leah, she said suddenly. Before I came here, my name was Leah. I wasn't a CEO. I was just an ordinary corporate drone, working a 9 to 5, getting yelled at by my boss, drowning in student debt. One night, I was working late. I was crossing the street when a truck ran a red light. When I woke up, I was Olivia Vance. My head was filled with memories that weren't mine, and a voice telling me I'd been dropped into a novel I'd once read, and that I was the villain who gets destroyed by the hero. I was terrified. I didn't want to die. So the first thing I thought to do was divorce you, the hero, and get as far away as possible. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. But you weren't anything like the book described. You were calm, powerful, brilliant. Everything you did defied my expectations. You saved my dad. You destroyed Kevin. You turned me from a terrified wreck into someone who was protected. I couldn't help it. I fell in love with you. I started to think that maybe this was my second chance. A new life with you, but it was all a lie. Everything you did for me. It wasn't for me. It was for this body. It was for your real wife, Olivia. She sobbed, broken. I looked at her, and the anger I'd held for so long began to dissipate, replaced by an unfamiliar feeling. Pity. She was a victim in all of this, too. A lonely soul, just like me, tossed about by the whims of fate. I walked over and offered her a tissue. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen, and asked the most important, most painful question of all. Ethan, where's your Olivia? Where did she go? My heart clenched. I was silent for so long that the light in her eyes began to fade. Finally, I forced out the only answer I had. I don't know. And the not knowing was the worst torture of all. In the vast, empty living room, the 2 of us sat in silence. A man who had lost his love, and a woman who had stolen a life. Two souls abandoned by the world, trapped in an impossible situation. After our confrontation, Leah moved out. She rented a small apartment and cut off all contact with me and the Vance family. I didn't stop her. I thought it would be a relief. Without that face in front of me every day, maybe the ache in my chest would finally dull. I was wrong. The silence in my life grew louder. I'd wake in the middle of the night and reach for the empty space beside me. I'd catch myself setting two places at the dinner table. I even started to miss her terrible cooking. The thought terrified me. My heart belonged to Olivia. Leah was just an imposter. I threw myself into my work, burying my confusion in acquisitions and hostile takeovers. While liquidating Kevin Lynch's assets, I found a hidden, encrypted file. It took my tech team 3 days to crack it. The contents knocked the wind out of me. It was a detailed report on the car crash that killed Olivia. The investigation had been commissioned by Kevin himself. The report outlined all the suspicious details: the brake failure, the corrupted traffic cameras, the driver who died on impact. But the last page was what shattered my world. It was a draft of a stock transfer agreement. Olivia was voluntarily signing over her entire controlling interest in Vance Corp to her husband, Ethan Miller. The date on the agreement was the day before the crash. Scrawled in the margins, in Kevin's furious handwriting, were the words, "She's insane. She's going to give everything to that worthless piece of trash, the room spun." All this time, I thought she was just disappointed in me. I never knew. In her final hours, she was trying to give me everything she had. The crash wasn't just business. It was Kevin's enraged, desperate act when he realized he was about to lose not just the company, but Olivia herself. A hot, metallic taste filled my mouth. I coughed, a spray of blood hitting my monitor. The grief and regret were so immense. I thought my heart would tear itself apart. Olivia, my Olivia, what a fool I've been. My hand shaking, I dialed Leah's number. "Where are you?" I rasped when she answered. I found her in a small apartment in an old building, a world away from the luxury she'd grown accustomed to. She was wearing a ridiculous cartoon print apron, covered in flour. She looked like a stray cat. I didn't say anything. I just handed her the file. She read it, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and finally to a deep, knowing sadness. "She really loved you," Leah said softly. "I know," I whispered, "and I was too late." "You should go," she said finally, turning her back to me. "This life, this love, none of it is mine. You have to find a way to get your Olivia back." Her words were like hammer blows. She was leaving. This woman who had turned my world upside down was about to walk out of it forever. Logic told me it was for the best, but my heart felt like it was being ripped in two. My feet were rooted to the floor. "Leah," I said, the first time I had ever used her name. Her shoulders tensed. What if? What if I can never find her? What if she's gone for good? I stepped closer. The person who killed her wasn't Kevin. He was just a pawn. The real mastermind is still out there. I looked at her, at the eyes that were so like my wife's, and made a decision that I knew might damn me. I reached out and gently wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek. "So, until I find the person who really killed her, until I find a way to bring Olivia back, or until I know for sure that I can't." I took a deep breath. "I need you to keep living as Olivia Vance, and I will protect you." Leah stayed. Our relationship settled into a strange, unspoken truce. We were not husband and wife, but allies. Comrades. I moved into her small apartment. We slept in separate rooms. I hunted down the true killer, a distant Vance relative who had orchestrated everything to seize control of the company. She in turn learned to cook. Her food became my only comfort. Sometimes I would look at her across the table, and for a fleeting moment, I would see my Olivia. The day the real killer was sentenced to life in prison, I got devastatingly drunk. When Leah came to help me from the sofa, I grabbed her hand. "It's over, Leah," I slurred. "Yes," she whispered, her own eyes wet. "It's over," but she's still not back. The words hung in the air between us. The revenge was done, but the real problem, the question of us, remained. I let go of her hand. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm drunk." We retreated back into our careful distance, the silence between us heavier than ever. Then, one rainy afternoon, we were on the sofa, watching an old romantic movie, just like Olivia and I used to do. As I watched the screen, lost in memory, I saw Leah, out of the corner of my eye, perform a tiny, unconscious gesture. She reached up with her left hand and lightly rubbed her earlobe with the pad of her index finger. My entire body went rigid, as if struck by lightning. That gesture, it was something Olivia only ever did when she was deep in thought. A tiny, secret habit I had never told anyone, that was never written in her journal. My heart hammered against my ribs. I whipped my head around to look at her. She noticed my stare and looked back, her eyes clear and questioning. "What is it?" she asked. It was Leah's voice. Leah's eyes. It must have been a coincidence. My mind playing tricks on me. I was about to turn away, disappointed, when she looked out the window at the rain and said, so softly I almost didn't hear it, "Ethan, you idiot." The tone, the look, the fleeting, familiar tenderness in her eyes. It was a perfect echo of the last line in Olivia's journal. My breath stopped. I stared at her eyes flickering in the dim light of the television. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw my Olivia looking back at me. Was she back? Or were they becoming one?